Welcome to another great episode of Create.Learn.Implement, aka CLI podcast with me, Coyetta. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I hope y'all have caught up on the past episodes because it's been fire. Okay, it's been fire. Today we have the lovely Jacent Wamala, who is a money mindset coach, author, speaker, and founder of Wealth and Wellness University. So stay tuned for all of Jacent's gems on the other side.
Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions, like how do I record an episode? How do I get my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? How do I make money from my podcast? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now Anchor can match you with great sponsors too, so you can get paid to podcast. So when I thought about starting a podcast, I had no idea how it worked. I don't know how I came across Anchor, but I did, and it was free, and it was 100% easy to use. And I love to use it to connect to my audience. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. Have you ever wanted to start a business but didn't know where to start? I know the process can be really overwhelming because I embarked on this process over 15 years ago and had such anxiety trying to do this myself. I don't want you to suffer the same fate, so join me and let me help you confidently start and run your business with ease. Go to www.coyetta.com, or you can find me on Instagram at I am Coyetta and click the link in the bio. It's that easy. Join me. Let me help you start that business. Let me help you turn your idea into a business, and let me walk you through the entire process. No stress. See you there. I have with me Jacent Wamala on the line today. Jacent, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for asking. For my audience who does not know who Jacent is, she is a money mindset coach and Health and Wellness University founder. So I'm going to have Jacent dive into your story. So Jacent, just tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Definitely. Yeah. So I was born in Uganda and I was raised in Las Vegas, Nevada. So, I'm first generation, third culture. And essentially, I feel like like many people, kind of was given a checklist, as far as like go to school, get a job, get married, have kids, right? Like there are these things that we're supposed to essentially do or check off as we, grow up and adult successfully, quote unquote, right? However, I went through life on that scavenger hunt trying to check those boxes, and it didn't work out. And I think that happens to a lot of folks where, you feel like you're doing what you're supposed to, or you're doing what you think you're, what's going to lead to you living, the American dream. And it doesn't turn out that way. And so for me, while I did, have a lot of opportunities, being, that my family was really supportive and opened a lot of doors for me, that I ended up, while I was in grad school, to become a licensed marriage and family therapist, ended up having gotten divorced from my high school sweetheart, and months later, unfortunately lost my father. And so he passed away June of 2014. And so those things happening very closely together that year were really difficult. And so I think that especially women, because that's typically who I spend a lot of time working with and talking to, have a tendency to still look like they're okay on the outside. And, continue to put one foot forward and put a brave face on, but on the inside, they're not maybe coping the best or doing, as well as they look like they're doing on the outside. And so for me, I was, essentially kind of going through the motions while I was in school and, getting ready to graduate. At the same time, like, again, a lot of Americans going into a lot of student loan debt because of my master's degree and credit card debt as well. Because during that time while I was grieving, I call it the grief storm that I was in, I didn't have a foundation for financial literacy, right? So we don't really go to school and like have financial literacy be one of the classes we take, or we don't really learn in our homes how to manage our personal finances. So a lot of us get released into adulthood without a foundation for financial literacy. And then on top of that, life happens, which turns into, kind of like the perfect storm. But fast forwarding, I, decided I wanted to get on a plan to see if I could get out of debt, because as the fog from the grief storm started to lift, I saw the wreckage that was like my life and my situation at that time, end of 2016. So it was from 2017 to 2020, 3 years that I ended up paying off over $90,000 in student loan and credit card debt before I turned 30, and then started doing that work with, women online, because again, I saw the parallel between my own experience, but so many women mentioning money as a major stressor in their experience and in their life too. So that's what I get to do now. And I love talking about just mental health, money, mindset, personal growth and development for the betterment of, our own well-being and our communities as well.
Perfect. Now, walk us through your pivot, because you were working as a licensed marriage and family therapist. So walk me through the pivot from that into a money coach, essentially.
Yeah, so for the longest time, actually, I still do both. At this time, I'm closing my private practice, so I will no longer be doing therapy after this month, because I'm going to be going on maternity leave. However,
congratulations.
Thank you. So, I was doing my private practice where I was seeing mostly millennial women of color for anxiety, depression, trauma recovery, and financial stress. At the same time as I was kind of organically sharing my own journey online and, what I was doing, because with social media, a lot of it is kind of sharing like what's going on in your life and what you're up to. And for me, it was budgeting and packing my own meals and paying down my debt, right? So that's authentically what was going on. And people would ask questions and want to know more, and started getting their own results from the things that I shared. And so then that turned into, my online business, Wealth and Wellness University, where essentially, I support mostly women, but everybody can get results from the information in building wealth without burning out. So for the longest, for probably about 2 years or so, I was doing both at the same time. And now I'm diving, directly into the money coaching, we'll say, because I feel like it has a greater impact, and it's right in alignment with my mission and, the legacy business that I want to create. And so while I'm glad to have served as a mental health professional and still use those tools and expertise on a daily basis, I realized that for me to really have the greatest impact in my life with the legacy that I want to leave behind, it really is going to take my focus and attention to make that happen. So that's kind of the pivot that I'm actually in, currently.
Perfect. Yeah. You did mention that you paid off $90K in 3 years by the age of 30, which is quite an accomplishment, because, some people can't even afford to pay one bill on time. So what made you decide that you wanted to make this commitment? Because that is definitely a commitment.
If it's a combination of things, it wasn't just one thing. When I think back on it, the way that I kind of like to look at things and really frame my approaches through honor and legacy. So for me, I know that being an immigrant, being a Black, being a woman, that there are a lot of sacrifices and things that family members, people that aren't even my family, right, have done for me to be able to have the opportunities that I have in my life. And I wouldn't have the opportunities and experiences and abilities to do certain things if it weren't for the choices that other people made that came before me.
Yeah.
And who would I be not to honor that? You know what I mean? And just coast based on that. But then there's the legacy piece, which is, you know, taking the baton from those who have done those things for me beforehand and taking it to the next level for my nieces and my nephews. And I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have children at the time or anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, you know, even if it's not like for my own kids, it's for my nieces and nephews. It's for anyone that looks like me. It's for anyone that feels, you know, like me, to see an example of someone really kind of living all out. I'm also borderline bougie, so I like to shop at Ross, but you know, I want to upgrade my seat, you know, when I get a plane ticket. So
Okay.
I didn't want to necessarily wait around for anyone else to do that for me. I wanted to be empowered and able to buy and have and do and experience whatever I wanted myself. So, you know, it really was wanting to see the world and wanting to be free. I have authority issues. So it's like, you know, I don't think I'm going to last really at a 9 to 5 forever. So,
Right.
you know, like there's just a lot of different things that kind of collided that created my reasoning. But what I did was my cousin had given me this book called The Smart Money Woman in 2016 for Christmas.
Yeah.
And January 2017 is when I calculated my net worth for the first time, and it was negative $70,000. And so that was the first time I had ever seen, you know, my net worth on paper, or ever really thought about, you know, what is a net worth anyway, and why does it matter? And I guess there's something I can do about it, or, you know, so having that reality check, I guess I could say, really made things clear for me. And I think when you're in a victim position, then you can say like, oh, well, I blame the education system, or I blame the government, or I blame, you know, whatever. Or, you know, when you take responsibility or ownership, because I was definitely sober and awake and an adult when I signed for those loans. You know, it's like, I'm the one that took these loans out. Yes, they helped me get an education, and I would like to get them out of my way so I can do whatever I want. You know, I think you become empowered.
Yes.
Now you have influence and some level of control in your life. And so I think I wanted to have more influence and control, and I wanted to use that influence and control in a place in my life that I thought would make a huge difference. And so for me at that time, it felt like it was my money journey. So yeah, it was multiple different things that kind of collided, but really being borderline bougie and wanting to be a good example.
I think you might have just answered this a little, but I don't know if you can expand on this. How did this decision at 30 inform your decision to work for yourself? Because now you're on a whole different plane.
Yeah, so I've kind of worked for myself on and off, because I would be like a 1099 here or there. I think I've only ever had 2 like W-2 like salaried positions, or whatever the case may be, as an adult.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent, I always knew I wanted to work for myself, because I have always had authority issues. So, you know, it never felt right for me to have to like request my own time off, or, you know, be working for someone else. Just even because I've had some amazing bosses, I've had some amazing, you know, positions. I've been grateful in that sense, but it just never felt like it was completely right, or it was like a forever thing. It always felt like it was a temporary thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I do also, you know, personally come from an entrepreneurial family to some extent. I also think that entrepreneurism is like the original way of being, if we think about it, right? People used to barter and trade. People used to have, you know what I mean? Like when you go to Africa, everyone's a hustler. Everyone has like, you know, something that they're doing. So I think that kind of mindset was ingrained for me to some extent.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's still different than like actually doing it and making it happen. And so it's easier said than done. And so actually last year was my first full year as an entrepreneur full time. And it requires a lot of personal growth, there's a lot of things that you can avoid in your personal life that you can't avoid when you start a business. Because
Absolutely.
your business is going to put a flashlight on all the cracks and crevices in your character and in your being, and it'll tell you what you need to work on. And those who resist or avoid trying to work on those things, usually will attain more bumps and bruises. And those that lean into the work that they need to do to become a better leader, to become a better communicator, to heal themselves of whatever stuff might be getting in the way, have an easier time, it seems like, in being able to grow and scale their business. So I knew that going in, and then I really made that my focus, as well as, what am I working on personally that's helping me to be successful professionally as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, aside from becoming a full-time entrepreneur, what other significant decisions have you made for yourself and your family surrounding money?
Well, I think definitely having gotten out of debt was one of the most significant decisions, just because it set the foundation for my relationships moving forward, if that makes sense. Because,
Yeah.
when I got into a relationship and started dating, which I, didn't know was going to happen and actually hadn't planned on,
Yeah.
I was very clear with my partner about, or with my prospective partner at that time,
Mm-hmm.
about where I was at, what I was doing, and what my expectations were, and what I was, essentially kind of open to entertaining or accepting. And, in my situation, right, not everyone's situation is the same, but in my situation, my now husband paid off his debt, right, his 5-figure debt, before we got married. And so we were able to start our married life together debt free, right, with a different financial foundation than I think a lot of couples are able to have. And then in turn, right, that naturally affects my bonus kid. She's going to be 10 next month, right? So she never has to know debt, and we talk about money and what that looks like. And we actually started taxing her recently, and, and teaching her about taxes so that she knows what that is. And
Yeah.
she doesn't like it, like any of us, right? So it's like, these are the things that you have to know as we are going to grow up and be responsible. And we'd rather you learn it now than later. And being pregnant now and getting ready to have a child, it affects your healthcare. Like, I wanted to have a midwife. We paid out of pocket cash for that. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to worry about what experiences we can or can't have, because money isn't something that we're stressed about or that we're unable to use to create the experiences that we want. So I think that in every way, having made the decision, and for everyone it might be different, right? That's just what my journey looked like personally. But I think for me, getting serious in my money journey and having decided to get the debt out of the way, which most people feel like they'll never be able to do, open the door for possibility of other things. I think we have a higher risk tolerance. So starting a business, growing a business has less pressure that comes along with it. Because I'm not stressed about like, oh, I have to make this money or something, you know what I mean? Because I'm in a different situation. So I think that it really has permeated every area of my relationships, in that things are much more laid back and less stressful because of the choices that I've made and that everyone else in the situation has made as well.
Perfect. You work with clients and you help them pay off their debts and many other things. So what's the craziest story that you've heard about why people find themselves in debt? Like, what are they telling you?
I mean, honestly, it's really quite similar. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like I've ever heard anything that was like super crazy. It's a lot of student loans. It's a lot of like credit cards. Now, what people are spending, on their credit cards or whatever the case may be, I think is one thing. I think, car payments, things like that, but it's really kind of a lot of the same stuff, at least from what I've heard.
Yeah.
and nothing that's been too outlandish or something that I've been like, oh my gosh, what? Now
Right.
the amounts are crazy, but like how they've gotten into debt, I'm not surprised by how, but the amounts, of debt that people are in.
What's the craziest amount that you've heard?
Oh man. I mean, I think it probably now these because I just talked to a lot of like debt-free people at this point,
Yeah.
but I know I have a friend who was like a farm assistant. She had over like 200K or something like that,
Mhm.
that she was like working through. So usually it's, maybe a few $100,000. That's not a house, it's not
Yeah.
a house,
Yeah.
of that's a worth of debt, that someone has got.
Wow, student loans are heavy. How do you feel about, the government possibly forgiving a portion of the student loan? Is that something that you think may be doable, or
I
is
think that's all well and cool, but like, oh boy, the way I kind of think about it is like, if you're dating someone and they always talk about something that they're going to do, but like what evidence is there that they're going to do that thing? But you keep dating them, right? Like, so do you keep dating this person that keeps saying that they're going to do something that they have yet to show you for years, like years and years and years, that they were going to actually do?
Absolutely.
I'm personally, would it be great? Yeah, of course, I'm sure it would be great. You know what I mean? It doesn't, it solves one problem, but then it opens the door for another, because even if someone still doesn't have a foundation for financial literacy,
Yeah.
yes, you can wipe the debt away, they still don't know how to manage their finances.
Mm.
So who's to say, right? Just like when people win the lottery, how
Mm-hmm.
many people win the lottery and find themselves broke within 2 years?
True.
Or, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, yes, I completely see that as being something that would alleviate a lot of stress and pressure for people. However, what are we doing to help solve the problem at its core, like at the root, which is a lack of financial literacy?
Yeah.
Because if not, then someone's just going to go get a car. They're like, oh, I don't have this debt anymore, I'm going to go get a brand new car. Or,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't have this debt anymore, I'm going to go do something else that maybe isn't the best financial decision. So I just personally didn't want to wait around for anyone,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
was like, the government does not have a good track record of money management
Right.
themselves. So I'm like, I'm not gonna personally
Mhm.
sit and wait for this person that I had started dating to do something that they said that they was gonna do for years, and they have never done it. That's how I see it. Like, we need to break up. I think this isn't gonna work, like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna have to do what I think I need to regardless. So I think holding one's breath, everyone has to make their own choice. I personally didn't do it, I wouldn't do it, but I don't blame people for, having
Hmm.
that hope.
Yeah. Hope is good. Hope is good. When you sit down with, these women, and you're talking about that, what is it? Where does the lack of knowledge come from? Is it how we handle money necessarily, or how it affects us in the future? Like, where is where's the gap?
So there's plenty of gaps.
Okay.
There's the historical nature of the society that we live in, right? Like living in an oppressive culture,
Mhm.
with racism and just like the layers that are built in as far as power and control, right? However, me personally being a woman of color, and an immigrant, to me, we all originally had access to abundance. We were abundant, right? Like we come from kings and queens. So it was more so a separation from what our original way of being, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So to me, it's not that like, we never knew or never had or whatever. It's because there was a separation, right? And intentional acts to keep people from, you know, being
Yeah.
who they were, right? So there's that piece. In that process, there is the lack of education as far as financial literacy,
Mhm.
when it comes to managing, making, and multiplying money, right? Budgeting, saving, investing, and things like that. So there's the actual gap in that, while one group of people in a society were being held back from, right? If people were not allowed to read at some point,
Yeah.
if there are people that were not allowed to even have certain conversations or access certain things or have certain things or do certain things, right? If people couldn't start businesses or own land or anything like that.
Yeah.
At the same time as that was happening, that there were other people that were benefiting from that, and they were having conversations, and they were, trading and learning and passing the information down from family members to family members and generations to generations. That cutoff is what kept the generations from being able to continue to share what has worked, in order for generations to continue to build wealth. So to me, it's more so kind of returning to some extent like an original way of being, and original practices, and not holding out hope again, right? Like not expecting the school system to teach our kids about financial literacy, right? Like they're probably not going to. Not expecting the government to take care of something that as a family, maybe we need to take back and make our own responsibility and learn ourselves to become an example, and then be able to share that information. Because usually, you can't just sit and tell somebody what they need to do. It's best to become the example that you want someone to, emulate, or whatever the case may be. So I think it can get pretty deep, but yeah, it really comes down to historical facts around racism, oppression, and things like that. And then it is what it is at this point. So do we sit and wait for someone else to change everything? No, we can take back responsibility and control of what we share, what we do, how we grow and evolve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in the spirit of taking back our power, our financial power, what is the first step we should take when it comes to addressing our debt? Like where do we start with that?
Yeah, I think, I can only ever share from personal experience. I think is the best, coupled with, the science-backed stuff. The first thing that I did was assess,
Yes.
so you have to assess where you are, which for me was calculating my net worth for the first time. Because usually our, what is it called? Credit cards are in one place, our car payments in another place, our medical bills are in another place, our student loans are, so we never see everything together to understand the picture of what our finances are looking like.
Yeah.
So I think assessment, whatever that might look like, doing a spending audit, being able to see like, where are we at right now? Just like if you wanted to go to a party, you'd have to know where you are to know how to get to where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
So you assess, and then you come up with the location. So again, if you want to go to a party, you can't get there without knowing the location of the party. And anyone would prefer to know the exact location of the party as opposed to a vague location of the party, right? We want to know that it's on, 1919 South Jones Boulevard, as opposed to, oh, it's in Nevada, because that's not clear and helpful.
Right.
So most people also create really vague goals, really vague places that they want to find themselves. I want to save money. I want to make money. I want to pay my debt down. And that's too vague, right?
Yeah.
So being really clear and specific about the location you want to end up in, and then making a decision. Because most of us are waiting to see the clarity of a plan that is, foolproof before we move. And that's just not how things work sometimes. Sometimes we have to put one foot first, and then the next step will appear. And then you put the next foot, and the next step will appear, So assessment, getting clear on that location, where you want to go, which is essentially, right, like your goal, your outcome goal, and then making a decision to commit yourself to the journey that it's going to take to get there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's part of it too. It's, being, as you said, being vague about what you want. I think you have to be very clear, so you can make a plan to get there, just like you said. But that takes practice, right?
Yeah, I mean, but the point is, a lot of, maybe, I don't know about your listeners, but I would say a lot of us are perfectionists.
Yeah.
Life is practice. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, perfection isn't the goal, nor is it possible. So everything is practice. But what happens is, because we're trying to be perfect, we never start. We
Yeah.
never actually practice. So we never actually progress and see what needs to change, or what we can tweak, or what we can do differently. So yeah, it's not, necessarily, maybe a home run
Mhm.
off bat, but starting goes a long way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now tell us about your book. Tell us more about what we can expect.
Yeah, so right now, we're in the process of getting that, all done up for release May 28th of 2022, which is really exciting. It's also my birthday. So, I wanted to, as I'm getting ready to go on maternity leave and really just shift a lot of things in my own life, I wanted to have a way to serve and really kind of share
Yeah.
a plan and a process that worked for me, and that works for all of my tribe members and my students, to be able to get results in one simple way, right? So having a baby actually kind of put a fire under my butt to get it done, because
Yeah.
it's something I've been thinking about for years now, for over 2 years. And my book editor, we actually first met to talk about me writing a book over 2 years ago, or about 2 years ago. But I had never actually gotten started. And so now's the time. Essentially, the book is called The Financial Freedom Formula.
Mhm.
And it's everything that I have, found to work to help people get results in their money journey in the last few years, both psychologically and, tactically.
Yeah.
So it's 5 steps to being able to decrease debt, increase your income, and save money,
Yeah.
in a very straightforward way. And I'm really excited, for folks to be able to have the book in their hands. Now, I also know there's a lot of people who have books that they don't read or finish, you know what I mean? So
Right. Yeah.
that's something that comes into the back of my mind. And I'm like, my goal with it is like, okay, yes, get the book, but like, actually implement what's in it, because that's where the magic happens, when you get mobilized. So my goal is not to motivate or inspire people. My goal is to get people moving and doing.
Mhm. Can you tell me one tip that you find that has really worked for your clients and something that's included in the book?
Yeah, so I call it the focus financial goal setting, like, process.
Yeah.
Really, what I did when I was on my journey, I first calculated my net worth. It was negative $70,000. I said I would like to pay this off, and I
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, when would I like to pay it off by? At the time, it was like, it would be nice to be debt free by 30. So I just did that calculation and, reverse engineered the numbers. So essentially, right, $70,000 divided by 3 years
Mhm.
um, gave me, the annual payoff of $23,333 or something like that, right? And then that divided by 12 months told me I needed to pay off about $2,000 a month
Yeah.
for 36 months, I believe, right? In
Mhm.
order to be debt free by the time, I turned 30. What I've come to realize is that reverse engineering and breaking down a goal has been one of the most helpful tips and strategies that I've shared. And to me, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I don't really do math. That's why I became a therapist, but but that helps me to make things make more sense. So, every month I'll say, how to save $1,000 in 30 days. That's $33 a day. That's $250 a week. I mean, that's $250 a week. That's $500 every 2 weeks. That's $1,000 in a month. So when I say it in that way and we break it down into smaller chunks, then it seems like it's more palatable for people to digest than when we start thinking of these big old numbers and like, how am I going to hit this goal? So that process of taking your total amount, dividing it by, the amount of time that you want to either save money in, pay down money in, or whatever the case may be, and that amount that it gives you, will tell you what you have to do in order to make it happen. And then you can say, is this an income problem? Do I not make enough money? Or is this a budgeting problem? I make the money, but I'm just not managing it wisely. Or is it both? Because for me, when I first started my journey, it was both.
Yeah.
I didn't make enough money and I wasn't managing my money.
Right.
So that gave me the clarity to say, oh, okay, this is what I need to do. I need to manage my money and I need to make more money if I'm going to hit this goal. So it wasn't like confusion as far as like, what do I need to do to hit this goal? I knew exactly what had to happen, you know?
Yeah. Do you find that which category do most people fall in? Not making enough or?
I would say it's to some extent, it's both.
Yeah.
Definitely 100%, most women are not making enough money.
Yeah.
Most women are not charging the value of their products and services, not what they're worth, because your worth is intrinsic. So when people say, oh, charge what you're worth, it drives me crazy because we
Yeah.
don't look at babies and say, well, this baby's a $9 an hour,
Yeah.
baby. This other baby's a $9,000 an hour baby or something. Like we understand that when children come into the world, that their value is intrinsic, like it comes with them.
Yeah.
So our value and our worth is intrinsic. We never lose it. But the value of your products and services, now, baby, that has a cost, that has a fee. And typically most women, what I hear, are hesitant to charge what the value of their products and services are worth. They don't even know how to charge appropriately. So they're usually cutting themselves short. And in their 9 to 5s, they're not maximizing their earning potential either. So yeah, not making enough money is a huge thing, I think, specifically for women. And then not managing their money is just another, aspect that comes into play with it too.
Absolutely. We know that debt affects relationships. We know it affects self-esteem. Based on your experience, how does debt affect your spiritual journey?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, it affects relationships and self-esteem. So there's 7 domains of wellness, and your spiritual walk, your spirituality is one of those domains.
Yeah.
Your professional and occupational, right? Your financial is one of those domains. So if any of your domains are lacking or need love and support, then it's going to affect the other.
Yeah.
So you should expect or understand that, dealing with financial stress means then physical to some extent, spiritual to some extent, mental, emotional, intellectual, relational. Now, when it comes on your spiritual walk, you may not to some extent believe the truth of what it is that you learned or that you have, decided is your way of seeing the world spiritually. So if I believe in God, let's say, and God says, ask and you shall receive. If I'm dealing with financial stress, or if I have had financial trauma happen in my life or whatever, it makes me doubt the scripture that says, ask and you shall receive, because then I can ask to be debt free and I shall receive that thing, right? So it actually makes me waver to some extent, I would think, in my spiritual walk, and not truly believe and accept what my spiritual doctrine, whatever that looks like, says is for me.
Absolutely. I believe that to be true 100%. So you're not operating in your full power.
Exactly. And you're not allowing yourself to be supported by whatever spiritual guidance you would otherwise have.
Absolutely. I agree with that. You have been traveling. Tell me how to plan for a trip financially and the next place that you're going.
So I'm not sure of the next place. It may be Ohio, which is really random for a conference.
Yeah.
That's in September. There's a conference I already know that's on the calendar
Yeah.
that I may or may not go to because I'll have a kid.
Yeah.
But if not that, then hoping potentially to go back to Uganda, depending on like how the world is and how things are going with my infant at that time.
Yeah.
So it may be domestic, it may be international. Now, as far as planning for a trip, the planning is the huge part, right? Like,
Yeah.
so being able to do your homework on, what the trip will entail or what you would like to do, being able to put all those numbers down on paper and, foresee what the cost might be and start saving toward or putting money aside, or again, breaking down, using that formula that I mentioned. So if I know I'm going to go on a $5,000 trip and it's not until, let's say, December, right? Then I know I have like 7 months.
Yeah.
Or I go on that trip. That's about $700 or so a month that I can set aside to pay for that trip and cash flow it instead of it going on a credit card or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, if someone wants to use a credit card, live your best life, that's on you. But hopefully you also have a plan for how you are going to, manage that balance, as it stands. So I'm just a huge fan of cash flowing things and doing things that are within your means, because again, it leads to a lot less stress, and worry. And I hate to hear about like people going on trips and then they're on the trip and they're not really able to enjoy it because they're thinking about like, ooh, should I use this card? Should I use that card? You know what I mean? Or they come home and then now it's like, oh, now I'm home and I have to pay for the trip,
Yeah.
after the fact. So I think cash flowing a trip is really helpful. Again, what I meant when I was saying breaking down the numbers is you can create a sinking fund. So you can create a separate account or you can earmark the money, that you're putting aside. That's what a sinking fund is, right? Is an account specifically for something. You're saving for something specific.
Right.
So a travel fund, is a great idea. And so many people want to travel that even if you don't have a trip coming up, you should probably still be putting money away for one, just so that it's there, whenever you're ready to pull the trigger. What if there's a good flight deal or something like that, if that makes sense?
That's true. That's true. What else should we know when it comes to planning, for specific things in our life when it comes down to the finances? Aside from, building an account specifically for that, what else do we need to do?
Well, I think in general, there's so many people who don't have emergency funds.
Yes.
So, so that's a big thing.
Yep.
I think probably about 60% or so of Americans don't have an emergency fund. And so essentially that means that when something happens, now it's not an emergency, it's a crisis instead of an inconvenience.
Yeah.
So it's really important, but it's hard to plan for something that for the unforeseen, that what we don't know is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
We would rather use the money to buy something on Amazon or Fashion Nova or whatever, Target. But being able to set money aside in an emergency fund, money that is only used for emergencies. The tire has gone flat. I got in a car accident. A family member is in need of me traveling there, because they're dealing with medical issues, or like you're only using this money in the case of an emergency. That is one of my number one tips, because it makes everything else so much easier. What I hear is that people feel so discouraged because they, will make some level of progress and then something will happen.
Yeah.
And they'll make some progress and something will happen. But it's like, but if you have an emergency fund, then it shouldn't be as big of a issue in your life than, when you don't have a cushion to kind of manage the blow. And so, for example, I did my first money challenge, which I think I'm going to bring back. My first money challenge, February 2020. Randomly, I was like, does anyone want to do a financial fitness challenge? And I think about 10 women at the time, actually just maybe 10 people, because I think there was one guy, signed up. And one of the ladies was able to save $1,000 before we even started the challenge, because she listened to one of my podcast episodes and followed through.
Yeah.
And then another young lady was able to save like $500 during, I think, in the first 3 weeks of the challenge. And that was February of 2020. Well, what happened in March of 2020? The world shut down.
Right.
And in that happening, those two ladies were both laid off from their jobs.
My goodness.
So they saved, right, between $500 and $1,000. That was a cushion between them and life happening. Now, is that going to cover them for the whole year? Heck no. You know what I mean? Definitely not.
Yeah.
But it was a cushion. The cushion is supposed to soften the blow. You know what I mean? And so they had that money because they got focused on their finances in January and February of 2020, that it wasn't as stressful as a transition
Right.
that it would have otherwise been had they got laid off and they weren't starting to budget and look at their money mindset and start transforming the way that they think and interact with money before the pandemic hit. And now both of them run their businesses, like they're living their best lives, and they're doing well. You know what I mean? Like it was a great catalyst for them to take their life in a completely different direction. So I think that's the importance of delayed gratification and being able to learn how to save when you don't have to for the times that you need the money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I got one last question for you. You are a soon-to-be mother. What does chill time look like for you when you're off work, when you're not traveling? You know, what does it look like for Jacent?
It looks like a nap.
Naps are critical, Jacent. Okay.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, pretty much it's me laying down. That's probably what it is. It's probably me laying down. I
Yeah.
enjoy, I enjoy having like a meal with friends or something like that. But if it's just like me, I'm probably like laying down. I enjoy learning, so I'm probably listening to a book or something. But at this point, it's a nap.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I know, this stage, it can be very draining when, you have a life sucking out life from you. So I respect that. I respect that. Jacent, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate that. Tell us where we can find you. Tell us where we can reach you. Tell us where we can get your book. Like, we need to know all these things.
Yes, so I am most active on Instagram at Jacent's Gems. That's my first name with an SGEMS, and that's the name of my podcast as well. And so that's where you can find me and be able to ask questions, tap in, learn about what I've got going on, grab my book if you feel so inclined to, and essentially stay in my world is on Instagram, my podcast as well, and YouTube is on the way, which is really exciting. So those are the places that I'm most active and that I love to chat with people. Don't come to my internet home and not say hi to me because it's weird and rude. You don't go to people's houses and not speak to them. So don't come to my internet house and not speak to me. Let me know that you are listening to this podcast episode so we can chat about it and be able to, just go from there.
Thank you so much. It's Jacent. Why didn't you correct me before, girl?
No, it's all good.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to another great episode. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, as all these things help to keep the podcast alive. Take care. Until next time.